Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I haven't uploaded in a long while. I've been pretty busy. As you can see here, Play Overwatch has tweeted that 6v6 is officially making its comeback. They announced their plans to kind of bring it back in a testing type of format about a month or two ago, but now they released the concrete details of what that's going to look like. You can see that in the tweet in front of me here, or really behind me. On your screens, they're going to be doing some open queue stuff, some hard roll lock stuff, as well as some other 5v5 test modes as well. So I wanted to give my opinion on that because I have a lot of thoughts on it, and there's been a lot of buzz going on Twitter about these modes. For those that are new, my name is Paul, or Helix Paul, or Skyrim Kid 81OW. I've played Overwatch for about 7 years now. I have more hours than I care to admit in the game. I've also coached on the side for most of that time, just as a hobby, something I'm passionate about. I love thinking, talking about, and trying to play the game at a high level. I peaked about M2 a couple seasons. I also worked briefly for an Overwatch League team, not as a coach or anything, just as a facility manager. So I love Overwatch. I've been involved with the scene for a while. And in this video, I want to talk a little bit about the future of the game in terms of bringing back 6v6, because it's a hot topic right now. And I don't think it's a great direction for the game. I'm going to give two reasons. One, hard, concrete, factual reason why it poses a problematic outcome if we're to bring back multiple tanks as an option. And then also I'll give my opinion, my personal experience from playing about 4 or 5 years of Overwatch 1 and why having multiple tanks is interesting. So one factual kind of breakdown, one opinion for you real quick. We'll get right into it. And thanks for watching if you watch, and thanks for subscribing if you subscribe. You don't have to, but I appreciate it a lot. I don't upload often, but I try and upload when there's important stuff to cover, and this for me is really important. I want to talk about two key points in regards to 6v6 and whether or not we should bring it back into the game as a format or as the primary format in general. One of the points is kind of a concrete reason that whether or no matter what format you think the game should be played in, or what your favorite format of the game is, a huge concern for adding more tanks into the game. The second is sort of a personal opinion slash my experience from playing 6v6 for about 5 years and all the different formats we saw of that. In my experience of why it doesn't work. Maybe other people had this experience, maybe other people didn't. Let me know down in the comments about that. But the first thing, as you can see here on the screen that I want to talk about, is queue times. You can see this graph, this poorly drawn graph that I have here, that shows the ratio of what people are actually queuing for when they play the game. DPS in the red, obviously support in the blue, and tank in the orange. I don't think the developers have ever actually released in any of the blogs, the developer blogs, or patch notes, what the actual pick rate is for each of the roles. If you go on overbuff.com, which is an Overwatch statistics website that pulls statistics right from the game client in people's career profiles, you can see that the damage pick rate is 41.36%, support is 36.89%, and tank is 21.63%. So look at that, guys. Damage is twice as popular as tank, almost twice as popular as tank. And even support in second is still 15% higher than tank at 36.89%. So the support and damage are by far and large the most popular roles overall. And I know this website got slightly less reliable once private profiles became a thing, but it's still a good snapshot of what people are actually queuing for when they queue for the games. And the developers themselves even said, you can see here in this interview with Alec Dawson.
Season 9, we're seeing
this is back in season 9, which is a few seasons ago.
I think damage is getting more popular, especially as you move up in the ranks. For a while there, support at the higher ranks was the most popular role.
And they talk about the two most popular roles being support and damage. They were saying how support got more popular because the role was so broken at the high ranks, but throughout all the ranks, damage, and this has been true since the game's launch, has been by far and large the most popular role. The problem with this is when you move to 6v6, which in this, just for the, one of the things, they're announcing several different formats, but one of them is a 2-2-2 roll lock, which is what we played previously in Overwatch 1. The problem here is when you move to a 2-2-2, you require 4 tanks, 4 DPS, and 4 supports to queue to pop any lobby, right? To fill the lobby. So what you're expecting here is 33% of your lobby, 33% of your player base, in order for queue times to be reasonable, has to be tank players. There's currently only 21% of the player base that's queuing for tank. This huge disparity, which we saw in Overwatch 1, caused massive issues with the queue times. I played in Masters and Diamond towards the end of my career for the most part, mostly Diamond to be honest. But throughout my career, I was also in Gold and Plat and even started in Silver myself. When I queued for any of the other roles for um, tank and for support and DPS, my queue time was on average probably about 9 minutes. Whereas all my tank queues were instant. Just because there were so few tank players to get these lobbies going that you were constantly in queue waiting for a tank to fill your lobby. I know everyone says that, oh, I'll wait longer for a game if the game quality is actually better. One, there's no guarantee that this will actually improve your game quality. And two, you don't actually want to do that. You'd much rather get a game faster. That way, if you just get a bad game, you can get through it, be done quick, and then move on to the next game. The more games you play, the more chance you actually have to get into good Overwatch games and show your true skill. Whereas if you wait 10 minutes for a game and it's bad, you just wasted 10 minutes. And you didn't actually guarantee yourself a good game through that wait. Second thing I want to talk about in regards to my personal experience playing 6v6 over the years was the meta. And if you're not familiar, the meta stands for the most effective tactic available. Basically, it means what is the best strategy available to you, including what heroes should you pick and what strategies should you use when playing those heroes to actually grind out a win. What a lot of people don't understand about this is the meta stands for the most effective tactic available. There's not multiple metas, there is one, and it's the same for everybody. Now, in like bronze, right, or silver, you're not going to actually see them playing the meta because they don't understand it. But the actual best tactic would be to just play the exact same thing that the pros use and run it down like that. The problem with this is when you look at what actually defines the meta, when you start to introduce multiple tanks, is this idea that's pretty commonly known about in Overwatch. There's now two, and they get to work together. And it's so much fun. And with tank synergy, what you start to see is this actually becomes super, super important more than anything else in the lobby. What you saw in a couple of different metas that were existed in Overwatch's one history is two tanks could really just dominate the lobby. The most notorious was Sigma and Orisa. Working together, cycling two shields. The Sigma would place his shield and use his suck, and then when his cooldowns ran out, Orisa, she used to have a shield, if you're not familiar with that, would put her shield out, and she would fortify, because she still had fortify, and you could basically endlessly absorb damage in the lobbies. There was so many different metas. We saw double shield I just talked about. Dive was Winston Diva. The list goes on, right? Ryan Zarya has been the most easiest to understand of tank synergies. The Zarya bubbles around when he goes in. The problem isn't necessarily that this meta is so good, because at most ranks the meta doesn't actually matter. The problem is when you start to think about all of these different combinations of tanks and what's actually good. Sigma Orisa was very good. You know, Sigma like oh, I don't think of another good one here. Like Diva Winston was also good, right? But there was so many combinations that were just straight up bad or unplayable. Diva Hog was horrid, like just not good in any circumstance. Some of these tanks were not a thing, but like Ball Hog was kind of a joke because people liked playing it, although I don't think it was very good, right? So what you get is when you talk about what are the actual possible combinations of tanks, is there's now 12 tanks to choose from. I'm a bit of a math guy, so we'll go a little math into it. And this is 12 factorial, which if you're not familiar with that is 12 times 11 times 10 times 9 times 8, etc., all the way down to 1, divided by, we're going to pick two of those tanks, so 2 factorial down here. And then we'll add in a bit of nonsense. We'll multiply that, so that's a parentheses, times. And that's a little confusing, I understand. But basically, what we're saying here is we're going to choose 12 tanks or choose from 12 tanks. We're going to pick 2 of them. And then this little confusing bit on the end is just saying simply no repeating. So we can't have like Diva and Diva as a pairing, right? There are hero limits and order doesn't matter. So you can't have like Diva Hog the same as picking Hog Diva. It doesn't matter which tank you were to pull first. The answer is actually, when you do this math out, 66 possible 2 tank combinations. The problem with this is, like I said, there is one like meta comp that's like super good. There's probably like, I don't know, like 20 something, like pretty good ones that are like, okay, yeah, like you could make this work, you can play with it. But the other problem is to like match that, and there's some that are just in the middle, like hit or miss, like indifferent. Let's use a different red to denote this. Also, like 20 comps that just don't work at all together, that are just like so horrible, like you would never want that on your team. It's so bad. And when you start to see how these metas actually, how these games actually play out, people who don't understand the meta well, because like I said, you're not playing the meta at every rank, is end up randomly, your team just picks one of these 20 comps that isn't good, and you just get steamrolled. Or your team picks one of these green ones, and the enemy ends up on one of those 20 that are bad, and you just get absolutely rolled. It's not fun for anybody. The game actually becomes really RNG and clunky just because people don't really understand how this tank synergies work. Like, it's just confusing to them, and rightfully so. Not everyone's going to be a pro at the game. People just get really confusing, and people don't understand how which tanks work together, why they work together, how to actually play the comps. So you just end up with a lot of RNG chaos. It's even further when you start to talk about, and I might fast forward through this because my writing is really slow. Again, 12 factorial is just 12 times 11 times 10 times 9 times, that's all that is. And then 3 factorial is we're choosing 3 tanks. So 12 divided by 3 factorial. And this bit in the end again is just no replacement. So you can't have Diva and Diva. And then if we get Diva Hog, it's the same as getting Hog and Diva. The order doesn't matter. And in this case, there's 220 possible tanks combinations. And we've never, I mean, we've seen it, but we've never like seen it with all these new tanks of how actually many would be bad. I imagine they're like just with having 3 that you couldn't get like you couldn't go like that bad with it, that it's like there's not that many that are straight unplayable, but there probably is like 60 or something that you would just never want to see. That's just we're playing like 3 of the worst tanks like the game, like these don't work together at all. Like what are we doing, right? Um and that's still like a 30% hit rate on like comps that I would never want my team to play that would get played. It's just terrible for the game, and it makes it really clunky RNG matchmaking. Other half of this, in terms of the last point I'll make on this, in terms of how the game actually plays, when we're talking about a max of a max of 3. Actually, no. Let's just stick with the same color. Could have 3 tanks, as I imagine it would go, 2 support, and then 1 DPS, right? Total 3, 2, 1 would be optimal if you're talking about this max of 3, min of 1 potential sort of like open queue type style format is 3 tanks would be optimal, but there's only 20% of the player base that wants to play tank. So the optimal strategy is for me to play 3 tanks, but on average, I only get like maybe 1 tank on my team. Out of 6 players, you're likely to get maybe 1. Like you're averaging probably like a 1.2 or something tank, like 1.3 tank players in that. And the meta is to have 3. So on average, I have 1, and then most of the time 3 is good. So like, just would never ever. So I gotta move my face, blocking my previous stream. Actually, let me just. It just doesn't work, right? Either match quality becomes so muddy, it's impossibly to balance and to think about unless you can actually encourage more people to play the tank role. These ideas of moving to 6v6 seem like disastrous for the game. I don't know. I understand why people want them back because peak Overwatch one was so good, right? Two tanks working together can be really, really fun. Provides a level of complication to the game that Overwatch 2 has never reached and it will never reach. The problem is when you get too complicated in these ways, you actually remove a lot of, or basically all of, individual playmaking from the game. Individual playmaking is fully removed, and tank synergy is really the only thing that matters. And you actually alienate a large percentage of the player base that values their ability to make individual plays in a hero shooter. And thanks for watching. If you watched, I appreciate everyone who watched the full thing. I don't upload often, but when I do, I usually like to stay up with date with Overwatch stuff. I've been following OWCS a little less closely than I would have liked, so hopefully I'll get back into that next. Um, Feel free to subscribe. Like I said, I don't upload often, but probably might start uploading more if I get motivated. So stay tuned for that. Peace, everybody, and have a great rest of your day, depending on when this goes up. Is the better format. The game plays better, and certainly there are benefits to it. But you have to sit in 10 minute queue for 10 minutes to even find a game. A lot of people will be like, "Oh, I'll wait if the game quality is better," but there is really no guarantee the game quality is going to be better, and you're gonna wait 10 minutes for a game that's not going to be guaranteed as good. The player base just does not support moving back to a 2-2-2 scenario where you need 33% of the players to be tanks because only 20% of the player base is tank. And people much prefer playing DPS and support. So everyone who plays those roles, which I'm sure many of you watching this video play those roles because they're popular, will be stuck waiting in queue even longer than you do now, which is pretty quick now. You only wait like 2 or 3 minutes for a game at most. But if you make this change back to 2-2-2, you're going to be waiting anywhere between 8 to 15 minutes just for a game because there's not enough tanks to support doing so.